Namaste and welcome to the BAPS Better Living podcast. This is the Dharmic Life series where we take everyday moments and find a way to elevate them through spirituality so we can have greater peace, happiness, and joy. My name is Dhawal, and in this episode, we're going to look at second chances, the thing that we've all had but sometimes we forget to give to other people. Today, we're going to discuss what it's like to be on the receiving end of getting a second chance and what it means for you to give other people a second chance as well. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Deven from Los Angeles. Deven, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you because you're choosing to use your career, your work, to make a real impact. I think you could have chosen to be a lot of different things, but you chose to be a physician, and you've been quite successful at this, even though you're earlier on in your career. You've been to the White House. You have a massive social media following where people really look to you for advice, for insights when it comes to things like mental health. I'd love to know maybe what took you down this path? What made you want to choose this career, this path, and this particular way of helping people?
I'm very excited to be, having this chat with you. So basically, the journey into wanting to pursue mental health and mental illness and just working in that space started with a love of storytelling. So I started writing. I went to college. I went to UCLA. I studied film and biology there. I knew that biology was what I was good at, but what I really enjoyed was storytelling. So in my time there, I would just watch movies. I would write screenplays. That was my thing. And around the same time, and shortly after graduation, I had a couple of friends that went through their own respective mental health crises. And I saw them, really go through things, and I gained a lot of empathy for them, and I gained a lot of respect for them because I saw that the way they saw the world or the way that, things affected them weren't necessarily the way that I saw that everyone processes their emotions in a different way, and that, everyone's way of dealing with mental health struggles and those sorts of things are different. And it just made me very kind of passionate about the field of mental health, in addition to my already existing passion of storytelling. And it all comes from a place of wanting to work with people through difficult emotional crises, mental health crises they go through, and help them see past that and realize that, regardless of how much their identity has been challenged, there's still a future ahead, right? Everything doesn't have to be dismal just because the past was dismal.
There's a real cost to giving people help when they are in a mentally bad place, when they're not feeling their best. I kind of want to have you reflect on what's it been like for you to give help to people who are feeling really stuck. Sometimes they might take your help, sometimes they might not take your help. What's that whole process like? Because at least for me, I'll tell you, I'll be honest, it can drain me quite quickly. Give it a day, give it a month. You've been calling them, you've been talking with them again and again. After a while, I just want to give up. I don't want to, reply to their text. I don't want to reply to their phone call. I just want to brush them off and say, hey man, hope everything works out for you. Let me know when you get better. What's it like for you as a provider to be able to show up and do this? And have you been doing this before you were even a provider of, mental health help?
I think when someone reaches out for help, I think it's good to respond. But, if you feel you're out of scope, you feel you're not within your own means to be able to help them, it's okay to be honest and state that and do your best to point them in the direction of a resource that you think could help them. So let's say that you have a friend who's going through a mental health struggle, and, once a month they reach out, they text you, they call you, they say, man, I'm really feeling down. I'm having dark thoughts about my life, that sort of a thing. Then, you could just come up with your own advice and just say, hey, it's going to get better, keep going, that sort of a thing. And sometimes those words can be helpful. But, it sounds like in this specific question, it's like, well, what happens when you've been doing that? You've been offering help in the way you know to do that, but they're not getting any better, it seems, and they keep reaching out, and you feel it's becoming kind of a painful thing for you to have to keep doing. In that case, then I think what the answer is you point them in the direction of resource, right? Of where you think there could be an answer for what they need. And if it's a mental health crisis, of course, you go to the emergency room, right? If anyone's ever in a mental health crisis, you don't know what to do. You take them, you send them, you direct them towards the emergency room. There's any emergency room in whatever country you're in, there'll be someone there who can help them, whether it's mental health, whether it's physical health, whatever it is that's going on, someone will be there to be able to help them. But now when it comes to something less acute than that and just somebody who consistently needs help, I think I've always tried to be there for people. And I think I agree that sometimes when you do that over and over and over again, it can sometimes take away the own time you have for your life and your own pursuit of your own goals and whatnot. And I think it's an interesting thing because I think sometimes when you help someone too many times, sometimes the rest of society might call you a doormat, that, wow, you're not really standing up for your own personal boundaries. You're not really, respecting yourself and that sort of a thing. But I think everybody's different. I think some people everyone's built a little differently. Some people are built to just help a little bit more and want to do that. And some people are meant to maybe not feel that way. And it's fine for both, right? Everyone's built differently. But I think that my answer to that's always been, if you feel you're in a place where you're able to provide that help and continue to give somebody that reassurance and support regularly, then I think you should. But again, if you choose not to, that's also fine. I would just say, in that case, point the person towards the direction of resources that can help them.
Choosing to help even when it's not being reciprocated. I've been on the receiving end of that, where I've chosen to help someone and I get stonewalled a week, a month, a year later down the line, where you've given them a bit of a financial boost, you've given them mental and emotional stability, and they choose to be sort of ungrateful about it. Um, what's it like for you to be on the receiving end of something like that? Because this is something quite core to you. This is something that's rooted in who you are. What's that like?
Right. And just as gratefulness is a human virtue, I think ungratefulness is also something that's just as prevalent. And it's a frustrating thing to come across. And I think that we all throughout life experience people who are ungrateful. Maybe we have instances where we realize that we ourselves have been ungrateful. I think I've definitely been on the end where you continue to provide and support and show up for somebody, and then you can't help but feel they're ungrateful or they take you for granted or that sort of a thing. And I think when you're in that situation, modern society wisdom will tell you a number of things. I think the number one thing it'll tell you is to, stand up for yourself, get out of there, let them figure out their own stuff. And I think there's some value to that. I think there's also some value to giving people second chances, even if they have been ungrateful or not, or taken you for granted. If you communicate that, right? If you can't expect anything to change if you don't, have that conversation and point out the things that they're doing that frustrate you or make you feel like, you've been taken for granted or that they're ungrateful for, good help that you've provided them, regardless of whatever type of help that is. So I think I've been in that scenario. I think a lot of times, sometimes you'll get really frustrated after if you feel like you've been taken for granted or advantage of or whatnot. But, you have to think like, did I help this person because I wanted to, or was I trying to gain something out of it? Was I doing it to get their praise or for them to tell other people that I'm a good person? Or did I help them just because, in my heart, that's my nature. And even if nobody knew about it and we were in some isolated cave, I would do the same thing. I would help them. And if it's the case where it's just in your nature and you wanted to, then I think that's fine. There's not really anything to regret. You just acted within your nature. And next time they come up and need something, you can either communicate that, you feel you've been wronged, or you can choose to not help them, although that might go in contradiction to what your nature tells you to do. So you have to communicate openly and make a decision from there. But I also think that, if it's not in your nature to want to do that, then it's fine to not continue doing that. You just have to communicate that, right? That, I feel you've been ungrateful about this, and it's okay to end a friendship, end a relationship, end a, whatever it is, due to that, as long as you communicate it clearly. I feel like a lot of, as you get older, and also in the world of psychiatry, you see a lot of the conflicts people go through could be solved with clear communication. It doesn't mean clear communication will solve the problem, but sometimes it'll point both of you towards realizing that whatever it is you two are currently in, you're not a good fit for each other in this agreement, in this friendship, in this whatever it is. And then sometimes you both may need to go other directions.
I think what you're bringing is kind of interesting. Like, there's an unconditional nature to which you have to give help, because that is what makes it likely that even if the other person doesn't take your advice, even if they don't take your help, you aren't affected by it. You're giving without any strings attached. You're giving without any expectations in return, because people are people. They may respond positively or they may respond negatively. They may not
Right.
reciprocate at all for a long period of time, and that's totally fine. Um, there's an unconditional nature to which you need to give, and I think when people hear the word unconditional, they think, well, you just need to be an open tap that just gives without any respite. But actually, I think you're reframing it in a different lens. You're saying give without any expectations, as in give. Don't expect necessarily that the person is going to change. And this is a good place for us to kind of switch gears a little bit and trying
Yeah.
to understand like where that actual internal state comes from. I certainly know that for a lot of my life, a lot of the challenges that I've faced, um, the reason why I've been able to pivot, the reason why I've been able to go out there and seek extra help, or the reason I've been able to find solace has come from spirituality, from spiritual understanding, from a spiritual relationship with the divine, with the guru. Um, that has been a major impetus for me to make these changes in my life. And I wonder, if that speaks to you, if there is a role that spirituality has played for you, because in some ways we talk about who helps the helpers. You're out there, you're giving help to other people, but where do you get your kind of, how do you replenish your well? For me, it's the spiritual rituals that I've been given by my guru.
Yeah.
That ends up being the well in which I find well-being. We have a thing called the daily puja, or the daily prayer ritual. It's something we do every
Yes.
single morning. And we know a lot of successful literature talks about making time for meditation first thing in the morning. And that's something that I do. I've been doing for 20 plus years, or 20, 25, or 30 plus years, I should say, where you get up in the morning, you take a shower, and you sit down and you offer a prayer of gratitude, a prayer of remembrance, a prayer of experiencing your true self. You're recognizing that you're not the mind body, you're going well beyond that, and you're just spending
Right.
20 minutes each and every single day. And for me, that ends up being plays a huge role in filling my well. I wonder if there's anything like that for you. Are there certain practices that you've learned through a spiritual practice, through the mandir or the temple, that helps you kind of keep that well replenished?
Definitely, definitely. So, I can relate, doing the morning puja, the morning prayer has been a longstanding part of my routine as well. And I think, looking back at like sometimes in high school, college, med school, sometimes if there was like a really busy morning or I hadn't slept, sometimes I would miss that morning prayer, that morning puja. And I could tell in those days that I would feel a little bit less like with it, a little bit less like focused. And I think that, that kind of spoke to the value that, having kind of a daily prayer in my life, holds, right? As I continue to, practice that. And then I think also, as I mentioned, a lot of the growth I had in life came from, practicing my spirituality, my religious connection. Going to, a mandir or a temple weekly for me has also been a really big thing. There's definitely, like I said, periods of time where I have to like miss because, work, or I need to study, or whatever, reason or excuse I have for not going. Whenever I'm in that period of time where I'm missing going like weekly, I definitely feel like a sense of loss. I feel a slight less sense of purpose, because I feel like I've really tied that in with who I am. And that doesn't mean that, everybody may not benefit from the same things I'm doing, but for me, that's been very instrumental. And I think it's important for everybody to find what those things are for them, and, find those things, cherish those things, and practice those things. And I think it will enhance their lives. It'll enhance their sense of purpose and their, ability to execute on that purpose. Everyone's different, but, finding those things is very important. And, similar to what you were describing, those have been very instrumental things for me as well.
Something that came for me as you're talking about this is there's a third angle to it. There's ritual, certainly. There is an element of these wellness practices, like making time for sleep, making time for exercise. There's a third element you talk about, which is relationships. If you have a good grounding, a good relationship that keeps that well full, that can really help you pivot in life, can help you replenish when you're feeling down. It can really kind of shape you and lift you up. Um, I'd like to know, from your experience, what's it like to have a relationship? What's it been like for you to um, what does a spiritual relationship mean to you? If that's played a role for you in filling your well.
Right. So a spiritual relationship and filling the well. I think something that's been very valuable for me is reading prasangs, or also known as stories, from the life of our guru, right? I think that a lot of the instances that our guru went through, a lot of the experiences he had, a lot of the relationships he had with other people, that those all show a ton of forgiveness, a ton of building unity, a ton of tolerance, and just real exemplification of values that I think sometimes we lose in modern society. I think there's a real tendency nowadays, at least what common wisdom points out a lot, is like, if this person isn't giving back, cut them off. If this person isn't acknowledging you're this, then cut them off, right? You can do better. You can find this. You can find that. And there's a lot of kind of just like almost blind, like self-positivity, self-growth kind of talk out there. And I think it loses the nuance of what it means to be a human, right? In any relationship you have with any person, family, friend, romantic partner, whatever, you're going to have to know how to forgive. You're going to have to know that things aren't always going to be equal. You're going to have to know how to accept a lot of things that seem unfair, or you're going to have to learn to be the bigger provider, the bigger person at some points during that relationship. You're going to have to do things that don't really align with what common wisdom tell you to do. And I think, when I look at spirituality, and specifically I look at these stories from our guru's life, and from his guru's life and his guru's life, and just going back throughout, all of our guru's lives, there's just so many exemplifications of what it means to be a person who serves others, a person who serves society, and what it means to really exemplify the values we need to have a good relationship. And those values being like, the building of unity, the showing tolerance, the reducing of your ego, the, how to support somebody, how to deal with ungratefulness, all of those different things that you need to understand and practice to keep any sort of relationship healthy and alive. I directly see from the stories, the real life stories, the incidences from our guru's life and his guru's life and his guru's life and so forth. And, I think for anybody, you need to find the stories or the moments or the things that give you that motivation and give you that reassurance that it's not bad to be that kind of person. It's not bad to give somebody a second chance. It's not bad that, if you do get hurt sometimes, it's not bad if sometimes people are ungrateful, that's part of the experience, and you can continue to grow and you can still continue to serve. You don't have to be reactive to every bad experience and cut things off immediately.
I'm reminded of a story of an Indian film director. His name is Arvind Babul, who was a chain smoker for decades and decades, right? He would be smoking dozens of cigarettes every single day, and he tried multiple times to try and give up that addiction. And he'd been unsuccessful. And this one time he met Mansai Maharaj, and he felt such a sense of peace, serenity, this sense of unconditional love, forgiveness, patience, all those sorts of things emanating from Mansai Maharaj, that he was able to take the guidance that he'd heard so many different times, but this time actually act upon it and gave up a decades-long cigarette addiction. I'm not trying to say that, you can go up to Mansai Maharaj right now and you're going to give up whatever addiction you have right away. In some ways, there's an element of the right time, the right place. But I think it speaks to the power that comes from creating that unconditional space. I think your state, your spiritual presence makes such a huge difference. And so when you tap into someone who is spiritually realized, like the guru, and you reflect on their life and you take their guidance and you walk on the spiritual path yourself, these changes that you're trying to go through yourself and the kind of impact you're trying to make on others becomes a lot easier to live out, because it's coming from a good place. It's coming from an unconditional place. It's coming from a place without any expectations. It's coming from a pure place. I think that makes a difference.
When we speak of the way that Mansai Maharaj looks at us, it's not, he sees our soul. He doesn't see like someone who committed these sins or somebody who did these things that should be praised. He just sees us what raw human spirit is, right? And what the Atma or the soul is. And I think that, looking at his worldview and his people view, the way he sees others, is inspiring to us, because it reminds us and it kind of undoes a lot of this conventional kind of confining thinking that we grow up having. And it shows us there's boundless amounts of forgiveness that we can shed onto others, boundless amounts of acceptance and like love and grace and patience that we can give to others that normally you would think there is a limit to, based on, I think, the way that a lot of conventional societal thinking has exemplified to us.
Definitely, I think going from transactional towards a much more holistic view of ourselves and for other people, I think that is at the core of what a spiritual transformation promises. And when you follow the guidance, when you are in the presence of someone who lives that and follow the guidance of someone who gives that, you end up changing yourself in the process. You end up impacting others a lot more deeply, and you end up changing the whole world through something as small as just changing yourself, changing your viewpoint, changing how you see other people. I think that's a great way of summing up a lot of the things we've talked about today. As we finish this up, are there any practical takeaways that our listeners can take away when it comes to giving other people second chances? Maybe it's even giving themselves a second chance. Is there anything that spiritual understanding, a spiritual relationship can give them in making that change happen?
Right. I think everyone is deserving of that second chance, including yourself, right? If you feel like, man, I really screwed this thing up, or I really failed at this, I don't deserve, grace or to go on, or those sorts of things. Like, you definitely do. And, everyone is deserving of a second chance. And I think just connecting that spiritually, our guru's life is filled with him giving hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people second chances, right? Even if they fail, even if they stumble, he's right there. No judgment for, the failure or the stumble. He doesn't see anything like that. It's just, how can he support and how can he, help propel them forwards? In the same way, I think we can be there for others, and we can take inspiration from that and be there to give a second chance to others, also give a second chance to ourselves, right, in our own journey of self-discovery and self-growth.
And for me, I think what's coming up is this idea that as long as I continue to see myself as the body mind, there are going to be limitations. There are going to be
Mm-hmm.
things that I'm going to blame myself for. But if I view myself the way my guru views me, which is as the Atman, the soul, um, that being has no flaws, and that being doesn't have a core identity. I can be multiple things. I can reinvent myself. I can be something more than the limitations that I've taken on and believed are my own. So um, it's certainly speaking to me about giving myself a second chance about things that I've given up on. I think this has been a really interesting discussion. Thank you so much for joining me today, Deven, and thank you for all our listeners for joining in today. Until next time, namaste.